Our headlines this Wednesday afternoon, August 23rd, here in Seoul. South Korea will now treat COVID-19 in the same way that it treats the seasonal flu. After seeing the number of infections drop for the first time in nearly 2 months last week, authorities have decided to lower its infectious classification from Class 2 to the lowest, Class 4. The Korean government pledged to start a war against senseless crimes, specifically the types of crimes that have happened in broad daylight over the past few weeks, where the assailant didn't have a personal connection to the victims. The Prime Minister released a statement on Wednesday hinting at bringing back auxiliary police. Tomorrow, Japan will release treated wastewater from its wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. The IAEA said it would regularly inform the Korean government about how the wastewater is being discharged, emphasizing transparency. Welcome to Wednesday's edition of the Daily Report. Let's start with news related to COVID-19. South Korea has lowered the infectious level of the virus to the lowest Group 4, treating it in the same way as seasonal influenza. From August 31st, authorities will no longer count daily figures and will instead allocate resources to protect high-risk patients. Choi Soo-young starts us off.
Starting from August 31st, the South Korean government will lower COVID-19's infectious disease level from Group 2 to Group 4. The Korea Disease Control and Prevention Agency said on Wednesday that this decision was made due to a decrease in the spread of COVID-19 since the end of June, a reduction in virus risk, overall stable epidemic prevention conditions, and sufficient capacity within the general healthcare system.
The government made the decision to classify COVID-19 as a Group 4 infectious disease by examining those circumstances, and it plans to implement the second stage of measures according to the COVID-19 roadmap announced in March.
Furthermore, the agency stated that although 1 or 2 major and minor COVID-19 outbreaks are expected each year, most countries worldwide have already been managing COVID-19 within their general medical systems. The decision means the focus now will shift from counting daily case numbers to protecting high-risk groups. The downgrade from Group 2 to Group 4 means there will be no more daily reporting of confirmed case numbers, which had been going on for 3 years and 7 months. Also, under Group 4, people no longer need to report COVID-19 infections within 24 hours, nor do they need to isolate. Instead, the government plans to operate a more precise monitoring system to observe the COVID-19 trend on a weekly basis. However, the officials said that even with the transition to Group 4, there are still ongoing concerns about new COVID-19 variants. The KDCA said that masks will still be required for the time being at infection-vulnerable facilities such as hospitals and nursing homes. Additionally, support for COVID-19 diagnosis and treatment costs, operation of screening clinics, and the supply of vaccines and treatments will still be provided free of charge for now. The government stated that it will manage the epidemic situation in a stable manner going forward. Choi Soo-young, Arirang News.
Over the past few weeks, the public has raised concerns over violent crimes targeting random citizens. To prevent any of these crimes from recurring, the government is set to restructure its police force. Officials will also push for tougher laws against perpetrators while providing more support for victims. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
Following a series of shocking crimes in South Korea, the nation is reorganizing the police force while bringing back auxiliary police. Prime Minister Han Duck-soo and law enforcement-related ministers addressed the nation on Wednesday morning to lay out major plans for public safety.
We will prioritize law enforcement as a top police duty and reorganize police structures to strengthen capacity. To significantly enhance crime prevention capabilities, we will actively consider the reintroduction of auxiliary policemen.
The auxiliary police was once a mandatory military service option for South Korean men. However, it began downsizing in 2017 and currently has no members. South Korea's chief of police said the plan as of now is to have up to 8,000 auxiliary policemen, which would take around 7 to 9 months. And explained this is to have more officers available around the clock. The Prime Minister also reiterated pushing for life sentences without the possibility of parole for such crimes, while establishing regulations to penalize public threats and possession of weapons in public places. In terms of perpetrators with mental health issues, related policies are being reevaluated, including prevention, early detection, treatment, and daily recovery processes, with the ability of courts to admit people into mental hospitals strengthened. The government is also looking to take care of victims better. One-stop solution centers will be established to provide various forms of support, including legal, economic, psychological, employment, and welfare aid for the victims.
Aiding the victims is very important, and the budget is to be prioritized. Considering our nation spends billions hosting international events, we need to inject plenty of funds to support this.
Lastly, the government is encouraging people to provide more tips to police regarding threats to safety while it pledged to work more with related volunteers. The Prime Minister also pointed out some fundamental reasons for the recent rise in these serious crimes.
Several factors contribute to these heinous crimes, including social marginalization and the proliferation of relative alienation due to the rise of social media.
While this does not justify the crimes, he says the government is analyzing the reasons with experts to come up with measures to fundamentally fix the root of the problem. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Tomorrow, Japan will release wastewater from its damaged Fukushima nuclear power plant. While the South Korean government says there's no scientific or technical problems with the planned discharge, officials pledge to still make sure the process is done in a way where the safety and health of citizens are protected. My colleague Chang Min-jung has this report.
With Japan set to proceed with the release of Fukushima wastewater as soon as Thursday, the South Korean government has determined that there are no scientific or technical problems with the planned discharge. Speaking at a briefing on Tuesday afternoon, the first deputy chief of the Office for Government Policy Coordination, Park Gu-yeon, stressed that this, however, does not mean that the government accepts or supports the wastewater release.
Our government concluded today that we'll ask Japan to immediately stop the discharge if the actual process goes differently from what was planned, as it would threaten the safety and health of our people.
In order to enhance the transparency and reliability of the disposal, Park said South Korea has consulted with the IAEA and Japan about having Korean experts participate in the on-site inspection operated by the IAEA. The Korean government also asked Japan to immediately stop the release and notify the government if something unusual occurs. Lastly, South Korea has requested the sharing of real-time information for prompter, transparent monitoring. In response, Japan, in coordination with the IAEA, agreed to post relevant data online every hour with the information provided in Korean as well. To ease concerns, the government announced its future plans aimed at protecting the safety and health of people in Korea.
As we have done so far, our government will focus on the health and safety of the people and respond transparently and promptly, while doing our best to minimize damage to fishers in the fisheries industry.
First, the government plans to significantly expand the scope of monitoring to include the waters near the Pacific Islands and the Northwest Pacific near Japan. Authorities also vowed to expand simulations using actual data obtained after the release to reflect what's really going on. The government has been judging that the impact of the release on domestic waters and marine products will not be significant. This comes as results from various simulations have shown that radioactive substances from the wastewater would flow into Korean waters several years later in a considerably diluted state. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
To make sure the planned discharge of Fukushima wastewater is done safely, the International Atomic Energy Agency will remain stationed at the plant, providing real-time updates to the international community. The UN nuclear watchdog also issued a separate statement to South Korea, promising to regularly hand over info regarding the release. Shin-ayoung reports.
The International Atomic Energy Agency will review the situation during and after the discharge of Fukushima wastewater. Following the announcement by the Japanese government on Tuesday, the IAEA published a statement on its website saying that its staff on-site will continue to monitor and assess the activities to ensure their ongoing alignment with safety standards, including on the day of the discharge starting and after. The agency has staff stationed in a Fukushima office that was opened last month, where South Korea will also send its experts. The IAEA experts there will directly observe the process of collecting wastewater samples. While regularly visiting related facilities, they will coordinate discussions between the IAEA and Tokyo Electric Power Company if any changes occur. It also plans to publish data for the use of the global community, including real-time monitoring information. An additional update will be provided as soon as the discharge begins. Unlike the United States, which has been supportive of the discharge, China has criticized Japan's latest decision.
China strongly urges Japan to rectify its wrongful decision and withdraw its plan to discharge nuclear-contaminated water into the sea.
A Chinese foreign ministry spokesperson added that Beijing will take necessary measures to safeguard food safety and the health of its people. Hong Kong Chief Executive John Lee on Tuesday said he strongly opposes the decision, saying the city would immediately activate import controls on Japanese seafood. On the other hand, the European Union last month decided to remove its import restrictions on Japanese food that had been in place since the nuclear accident in 2011. Meanwhile, the environmental organization Greenpeace has criticized Japan's latest decision, arguing that it violates human rights in both Japan and the Pacific region and that it ignores the concerns of people, including fishermen. 신하영, Arirang News.
South Korea will focus on helping the socially underprivileged while normalizing finances with its budget in 2024. That's according to Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chu Kyung-ho at a budget meeting between the government and the ruling People Power Party on Wednesday. Officials laid out a plan that included increasing financial support for parents with newborns and infants. Full tuition will be given to students from low-income families. There will also be new one-on-one care services for disabled people with developmental disorders. For small business owners, low-interest loans will be expanded, and there will be financial support for their energy bills and insurance coverage. The outlook for the manufacturing sector in August has worsened due to a slower-than-expected recovery in the semiconductor industry. According to the Bank of Korea's Business Survey Index on Wednesday, business sentiment among manufacturing firms fell 5 points from July to 67, the lowest we've seen since February. The figure for non-manufacturing businesses also came down for 3 months straight, dropping a single point to 75. The BSI for all industries also dropped 3 points to 71, falling for the third month in a row. Moving on to news in the United States, Washington has made clear that it doesn't want the Chinese economy to tumble, calling on Beijing to be more transparent about the state of its economy. The U.S. also removed some Chinese entities from its export control unverified list. Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Last week, the Chinese government stopped the publication of a report on soaring youth unemployment amid concerns the statistics would reveal new weaknesses in the country's recovery. China also cracked down on corporate due diligence firms operating in the country, halting the flow of information to overseas businesses. In response, U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan on Tuesday called on Beijing to be more transparent about the state of its economy. Speaking to reporters in Washington, Sullivan said that for global confidence, predictability, and the capacity of the rest of the world to make sound economic decisions, it's important for China to maintain a level of transparency in the publication of its data. His comments also come as U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo is set to travel to China at the end of this month for talks with high-level Chinese officials in what seems to be a move by Washington to stabilize relations with Beijing. Raimondo's trip follows a 4-day visit by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen last month, who held more than 10 hours of meetings with senior officials in Beijing. Meanwhile, in a bid to further normalize bilateral trade with China, The U.S. Department of Commerce announced Tuesday local time that it has removed 27 Chinese entities from its export control unverified list. The Chinese Commerce Ministry welcomed the decision, saying that the move is in line with the common interests of the two sides. The ministry added that solutions that would be beneficial to both countries can be found as long as the two sides follow the principle of frank cooperation and mutual benefit. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Washington has renewed its ban on Americans traveling to North Korea for another year, maintaining a restriction that has been in place since 2017. According to the U.S. State Department on Tuesday, the latest extension comes amid rising tensions over Pyongyang's nuclear and ballistic missile programs, as well as the uncertain status of U.S. serviceman Travis King, who crossed the North Korean border last month. The ban will be published in the Federal Register set for release on Wednesday and has been signed by Secretary of State Antony Blinken. It will remain in place until August 31st of next year. We're heading into the second day of the BRICS summit in South Africa, and we may hear talks on expanding the group. Wednesday's achievements will likely be shared in what's called the Igoli Declaration, named after the Zulu word for Johannesburg. Lee Siu with the latest.
The BRICS group of major emerging economies on the second day of its 15th Leader Summit on Wednesday is expected to discuss major issues, including the expansion of the group and economic cooperation. The presidents of China, Xi Jinping, and Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, as well as the Prime Minister of India, Narendra Modi, and the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, representing President Vladimir Putin, are being hosted by South African President Cyril Ramaphosa in Johannesburg. At the closed and open meeting scheduled for Wednesday, the leaders are expected to continue discussing whether to add new members to the group that's aiming to become a geopolitical alternative to Western-led forums. 23 countries have formally applied to join, including Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Indonesia, and Egypt. China, South Africa, and Russia are open to accepting new members.
South Africa and China have similar views with regard to the expansion of BRICS membership, and we look forward to the discussions that we are going to have with other BRICS leaders later today during our retreat.
We need to strengthen strategic cooperation, practice true multilateralism, promote the expansion of the representation and voice of countries in the Global South in the global governance process.
India, wary of China's dominance, has warned against Russian expansion but is undecided. Brazil is reportedly concerned that potential expansion will dilute its influence, although it's shown support for its neighbor Argentina's application to join. The leaders are also expected to discuss trade and investment opportunities, energy cooperation, and infrastructure development. Also on the agenda are ways to strengthen mutualistic partnerships between developing countries in Africa and the Global South, reforms to global governance, and fostering a global environment for peace. Based on the results of the discussion, an announcement on the so-called Igoli Declaration is expected. Named after the Zulu term for Johannesburg, the declaration will cover cooperation achievements in the areas of politics and the economy. The three-day summit runs until Thursday. Lee Si-hu, Arirang News.
Switching gears to what's happening in the arts sector. The Royal College of Art has partnered with Seongnam Art Center for a 3-week summer short course in South Korea in 2024. The workshop will be held at Seongnam Art Center from July 18th to August 7th next year. It will be the first time for the program to be held outside of the United Kingdom. The course serves as an opportunity for young artists from around the world to learn from the RCA faculty and network with other artists. The RCA is a world-renowned art and design school based in London that has produced world-class artists.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In northwestern Pakistan, 8 people, including 6 children, were safely pulled from a cable car in a dramatic rescue. The 12-hour ordeal on Tuesday near the city of Battagram saw 1 child airlifted by helicopter, while the rest were moved to safety by a zipline. Pakistan's army said that rescue efforts were made dangerous and difficult because of windy conditions. The children had been on their way to school when one of the cable car's cables snapped almost 300 meters above a ravine. The cable car is used to cut travel time through a valley from 2 hours to just 4 minutes. In Greece's northeast, firefighters fighting a wildfire have discovered the remains of 18 burnt bodies. According to the local fire brigade on Tuesday, the bodies were found by a shack in a remote village near the port city of Alexandroupolis. They are believed to have been migrants who crossed in from Turkey. The Greek border region is a known crossing point for thousands of migrants looking to enter Europe. The discovery comes as a number of wildfires rage in Europe, including in neighboring Turkey, where 6 villages have been evacuated and water traffic was temporarily suspended on the Dardanelles Strait. It also comes amid scorching heat waves in southern Europe that have triggered several red alerts in Italy and France. Now, after months of political suspense and legal maneuvers, Thailand has elected Srettha Thavisin of the Pheu Thai Party as its new prime minister. The real estate mogul was elected in a successful parliamentary vote on Tuesday, supported by a coalition that includes pro-military parties linked to a 2014 coup that installed military-backed rule. An election back in May saw the Progressive Move Forward Party win the most votes, but they were blocked from power by conservative senators. Thavisin's election came hours after former PM and fugitive Thaksin Shinawatra returned to the country after 15 years of self-imposed exile. He was immediately arrested and charged with abuse of power and other criminal offences, which he says are politically motivated. Shinawatra is known as a figurehead for the Pheu Thai Party. And finally, a rare spotless giraffe has been born at a private zoo in the U.S. state of Tennessee. It's currently the only one of its kind in the world that we know of. Only one other spotless giraffe born in a Tokyo zoo in 1972 has ever been recorded in history. A giraffe's spots serve as a form of camouflage and aid in thermal regulation. The zoo is now looking to give her a name and has opened an online vote on its Facebook page. People can choose between 4 names: Kipiki, Feriali, Shakiri, or Jamila. Voting closes on September 4th. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. It's Choseol today, the second autumn seasonal term. Summer heat should subside from now on. Today's rain might help to cool things down a bit for western parts of the country. Heavy rain that started on Jeju Island this morning has been expanded to more western regions. And the capital area in Gangwon-do province could see more than 150 millimeters of downpours. And the rest of the country could see 50 to 120 millimeters into Thursday. Now, a heavy rain advisory has been issued for some of the northern central areas, including here in Seoul and Gangwon, Jeollado provinces. Meanwhile, eastern areas will have a scorcher under sunny skies with some passing rain in the afternoon. The east will see rain mainly tomorrow. Seoul and Chucheon are seeing highs in the mid-20s this afternoon, but Gyeongju at 34 degrees Celsius. On and off rain continues into Friday, then more showers are expected early next week, bringing much bearable temperatures to the country. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
Thank you for joining Wednesday's edition of the Daily Report. Do stay with us for a panel discussion on what to expect now that Beijing has decided to resume overseas group tours to South Korea. As for the Daily Report, we'll see you again at this hour tomorrow.